This is In Between Them, a podcast where we uncover what it really felt like to be a child of divorce. I am Shannon Darrow, and each episode brings honest stories from brave adults who lived through this as children. This is In Between Them. Let's get going. Hi, Sydney. Thank you so much for making time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we get started, I would love for you to just kind of give a high-level brief snapshot of who you are, just so the audience can kind of relate to you, know a little bit about you, but up to you to what you want to share. But if you could just give us that, that would be wonderful.
All right. Well, I'm currently 29 years old. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I work with computers. So, I spend a lot of time sitting at a desk and getting a vitamin D deficiency. My main hobby is crocheting, and I love playing video games or pretty much doing anything with my spouse. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I'm planning on having a baby, starting to try for a baby later this year. So, yeah,
Congratulations. That's a wonderful thing. Um,
thanks.
and may I also say thank you for your service, because I think that's so
Oh,
important and so valuable. So thank you.
thank you for your support.
Um, we're here talking about and telling and sharing stories about your story as you navigated your parents getting divorced. And so I really like to start with, how old were you when your parents got divorced, and what do you recall from that time, if anything? Some people are very young and they don't remember. But just, how old were you, and what are your memories of that?
So I was about 5, 6 years old, something like that. Me and my mom and dad were all living in a house together, of course, and I was actually not wise to the idea that anything was going on. All of a sudden, you know, I was spending half my time at the house I grew up in with my dad, and the other half on a mattress on the floor with my mom in a one-bedroom apartment.
Wow.
So it was a very quick thing for me to find out. And I felt so alone because I didn't really know any other kids my age at the time, except for one girl in my class who had divorced parents. So I felt like kind of alienated in this weird way. But,
Mhm.
to my understanding, up till that point, my parents were happy and everything was fine.
Interesting. So your dad stayed in the family home, but that's a little bit more rare. Um, but I am finding that if someone stays in the family home, that seems to keep some like level of consistency there. I don't know how long he stayed there, but um, what did that look like initially going back and forth? Do you recall what the schedule was, or how often it was, or what that was like for you?
I do remember what it ended up being. It's kind of hard to remember just because I was so little
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
beginning of it. But I do remember the day me and my mom were getting into the apartment, and that was the only time I had ever seen them fight. They were, kind of fighting on the sidewalk a little bit. I don't know if it was about scheduling or what. My mom told me to go wait by the car. They did their best effort not to let me see them fight. So I definitely, like, especially when they were living together and going through that process of separating as a couple, like I never knew, as I said. But I don't remember how long my dad and I stayed in that house exactly in our original family home. It
Mhm.
wasn't very long.
Yeah.
Like maybe a year or so,
Okay.
perhaps. I don't know, maybe two. I don't know. But
Okay.
it was weird being at home with my dad and my mom not being there. And like it's like everything was normal. Like mom was just at work and dad was home with me up until the fact that I remember while mom's at the apartment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And did you have a good, or like a good bonded relationship with both of them? So that time with each of them was good time, or what was that like for you?
I think it's a little complex and it changed a lot as I got older. My dad is really, really into physical fitness and, doing sports and hiking and stuff like that. ADHD runs in our family. I have it. My dad has it. My younger brother has it. So, now a neurodivergence is kind of a big factor in that too. Um, but I was always doing everything I could to like bond with my dad. I felt like, I had to be into all the same things he was in order for us to like have fun together. And that's not a bad thing as you're little, like you're trying things. But I think as I got older, it was definitely like if I don't do these things, then dad doesn't want to hang out with me or whatever, or dad's not interested if it's not his interest. My mom was always very busy. She was a mortgage broker when I was younger. But when I got to high school, she went to law school and she's now an attorney. She's a prosecutor.
Mm.
So something my dad, as the way she tells me, always told her she'd never be able to do, like that she wasn't smart enough or whatever. So, and it's just so different now. And my dad is a public school teacher. He teaches math in high
Okay.
school. Um, but yeah.
Okay. So, well, I had many questions as you were talking, and I was paying attention and didn't write them down. So now I'm trying to go back to them.
It's okay.
No, it's totally fine. Um, so the last thing that kind of you said that triggered a thought for me is your mom said that she is now something that your dad said she never could be. Is that something that she told you as an adult or something that she told you back then?
Definitely as an adult, she did her best not to. They both tried their best not to talk negatively of the other parent now. Were they always perfect at that? No. Um, everybody can be passive aggressive sometimes. And that really mainly came into play with money specifically.
Mhm.
You know, um, money was always a really big problem of conflict between my parents. You know, seemingly when they were married and after they got divorced too. I was always provided for, and my schedule ended up being I spent half the week at my mom's and half the week at my dad's. It was a 50-50 joint custody situation.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Um, so I did answer my question, and then I'll come to something else you just said. But um, when you were talking about that about your dad and kind of saying, you felt like you had to do what your dad was interested in, and that when you were young, it wasn't a big deal because you're trying different things and kind of it's fun to do whatever your parents are doing. Was that something that you feel like he put on you, your awareness of that? Or do you think that that was kind of self-imposed in terms of feeling like he would you didn't say pay attention to, but I'm thinking just that, the way you could connect, you had to be doing what he wanted to do. Is where did that come from?
I think it was a bit of both, to be honest. I mean, kids always want their parents, undivided attention, their affection, and a lot of kids shape themselves around what a parent wants out of them. And my dad, like particularly because we have ADHD, he's like, you're always going to be in a sport, right? And that wasn't a problem for me. I'm an athletic person. I like being physically active, but it was like this kind of things like, oh, if I don't make the team, will he feel disappointed? Right. And my dad was never the type to tell me whether or not he was disappointed. He would just be like, oh, that sucks and move on. But I didn't know if he was like secretly ashamed that I didn't make the basketball team or something. My dad had a basketball scholarship in college. So it's always, and I call him a workout junkie in a way. He's very in shape. Um, but on the other end of the token, it's like I was always a tomboy growing up. I mean, even right now, like me wearing makeup for this interview is rare. I don't, and that's also because I've got skin problems. That's another thing. But I don't do a lot to go out of my way to be feminine. I work in a male dominated field and I'm comfortable with that, right? I'm comfortable around men because I understand the expectation in a way. I understand to some degree the way they communicate. And I think that's because I tried so hard to understand what my dad wanted out of me. He never yelled at me. It would always be like if I did something wrong, he wouldn't come up and yell at me. He would say, disappointed in you. But he usually wasn't the one telling me when I was doing something wrong. It was my mom or my stepmom because they were a lot more engaged with the parenting portion of it. So,
Okay. Okay. Um, is that still, I don't want to jump ahead and stay ahead, but is that still reflective in your relationship with your dad as an adult, or is that something that over time it kind of changed?
so I had my wedding in 2024. Me and my husband got married in 2022, but we had our wedding later. About a month before our wedding, me and my dad had this huge blowout that had been building for a long time over many things I'm sure we'll get into. But I told him I don't want to speak to him anymore and to not come to my wedding. So, and that if he shows up, he'll be asked to leave. And my mom walked me down the aisle instead. And we haven't spoken since.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Well, we will get to that, I'm sure, at some point. Um, Something that you talked about when you said, and I applaud them for trying, like you said, to not talk badly about each other. Obviously, to your point, nobody's perfect, but just hearing that people tried is a really big deal because I'm hearing a lot. I know that a parent talking about the other parent is damaging, but it's actually incredible how damaging it is, and also um, how prevalent it is. At the same time, it's completely avoidable. So it's this impact that kids feel that is one aspect of divorce that they actually don't have to feel. Parents
Mm-hmm.
have a choice in that. They have control in that. Obviously, in very rare circumstances, there's no control and no choice. But so, anyways, it's good to hear that they at least try to be like that. You did
Mm-hmm.
indicate that you were aware of money issues. Can you give me an example or expand on that a little bit just to see what you're talking about?
So on my dad's side, we have a family trust fund that my grandfather set up. I was 3 years old when he passed away. And my dad went out of his way all the time with both my mom and my stepmom to make it clear that he was not going to let them benefit at all, even if it would benefit the child for it to happen that way. He always ended up being more well off than my mother did, right? Even
Mhm.
though my mom's an attorney now, I dare say my dad probably has more capital built up than my mom. Uh, and my mom struggled with money. So I do remember I needed my fees for the track and field team for the year to get my uniform and all that. So it's like $50 that I have to give to the school. If I asked my dad, who I knew had a lot more flexibility money wise, he would say, "Why wouldn't you ask your mom? Like, why do I have to pay for everything?" If I asked my mom, depending on where the bills were that month, I mean, there's times where she cried when I asked her that question. I don't want to make my mom cry. Who does? Right? And then my stepmom, and I was very blessed to have a really great step parent. She was the one who helped kind of like soften that buffer, right? Like she was like, just come to me and I'll make sure it gets done. She took a lot of that stress off of me once I was older, right? But like a lot of the stuff younger, it was always like, why does your mom not drive you places? Why do I have to this, that? Like that's the way my dad did it. Whereas my mom would be like, your dad didn't pay for it. Oh gosh, that's like just so typical. Why I'm so frustrated
Mhm.
with him. Like, why
Yeah,
can't he just get it together? That happened every now and then. That wasn't by any means like the
constant.
usual,
Yeah,
but that's like, and I mean, again, I was never like, it was never like, oh, are we going to be able to afford dinner tonight? Like, I was always provided for. I didn't have to deal with those kinds of things that I know some people have to deal with in a divorce situation. Like, it was never like a problem of my needs being met. It was more like those extra things can sometimes
yeah,
get passive
yeah.
aggressive.
But that awareness at, even like 10, 12, 14, you're still internalizing that to some degree. And also, it's probably shaping you around your own finances in a way too, so that would
Mm-hmm.
be an interesting thing to tap into, is, and not to get into your finances, but I'm sure you can see ways
It's
that
fine.
that it impacted the way you think about money or live your life, because those are two very different dynamics. Basically, one, someone's worried about money, to put it just kind of very black and white, and the other one's not.
Mhm.
Those two differences cause a massive amount of different stress when you're the one that's
Mhm.
worrying. And so, um, and then you being aware of those kinds of things, oh, he didn't pay, or he should pay, or he never pays, or him saying what he's saying, just ask your mom. And then you're like, you have the money, yet you're telling me to go ask my mom, who may or may not have it. And then what that makes you feel like. And so it's again an example of how kids are, let's just say, totally unintentionally, and maybe that's the case, maybe not, but unintentionally put in the middle of a financial dispute, essentially, that's ongoing, even if it's not consistent for a kid.
Mhm.
And, that's just another thing that kids should be spared from, because you shouldn't have to worry about that. And if you are involved in that in some way, then maybe it should be like an ability to teach lessons around finances,
Mhm.
if you have no way other than, incorporating the child into it, then let's use it as a teaching lesson to teach the child about money or something. So there's something
Right.
valuable or positive, essentially, that comes out of it. I mean, maybe that's a way to go with that, that's better, if we can't escape it totally. But
I
um
personally think that when I raise my own kids, that that's definitely something that's like, me and my husband are both children of divorce. So I think that kind of comes into play for both of us to some degree. And
yeah,
I mean, I definitely still like the topic of money is an extremely stressful topic for me, not because like I make well, I'm probably in the top 5% for my age bracket. I'm pretty, let's just say, like
yeah, you're
compared to
fine.
most people my age,
Yeah,
I'm pretty rich,
yeah.
honestly. Uh, so I don't have like a problem with money, but the concept of talking about it with somebody I love makes me like freak out,
Yeah.
right? And that's the part that sucks for me is that like my parents, with the way they both acted about money, not that I definitely think one was more in the wrong with it than the other, let's just say, but it still has affected me in that like my husband, being very extra patient and wonderful like he is, has to take extra steps when it comes to talking about money. And
Hmm.
I'm getting better, but it is something I have to put effort towards as an adult, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I actually do know, um I mean, you kind of summed up my own life in a way. My money was a very big thing, constantly stressful, talked about. My parents were very different, their approach about it. And to this day, to your point, I like have to rev up to talk to my husband about money. And every time I do, he's looking at me
Mhm.
like, why are you so worried? Like, it's not a big deal. And I don't understand how he doesn't think it's a big deal. Meaning, like, there's no angst around it. We're just talking. And it's like we're talking about, what do you want for dinner? We're just
Mhm.
talking something through. But I have so much stress. I'm trying to find the right time to bring it up. And so I totally get that. And it's
Mhm.
amazing how, like, my parents were not divorced, but that doesn't matter, because money issues can be, they can come from anything. Um, but I think they get so exacerbated in divorce situations because money becomes a piece of the situation. And
Yeah,
so
something
if
to fight over.
parent right. And so if parents can realize, like, to your point, it's an impact that lasts into the way you're dealing with your husband and thinking about your children. And maybe it's going to make you better for it. And that's a wonderful thing. But it's still something where realizing the impact of that is incredibly important. So I thank you for sharing that, because I totally get it. And I just completely understand what you're saying.
Mhm. Oh
Um,
yeah.
so you've talked now about your mom and your stepdad, but what I want to ask real quick before we get to your
Stepmom. Sorry, my mom never got
sorry,
remarried.
yeah, sorry, mom and stepmom. Did when so we kind of jumped to you were doing the half week on, half week off, so 50-50 basically. Did that continue or did that ever change? And how was that transition for you? Like, did you feel like you managed that well? Do you wish that that had been different? Did you ever voice a different desire?
Well, so for the very large majority of my childhood, that remained the same. I signed up for the Navy at, I'm an October baby, so I turned 18 at the beginning of my senior year, and the next month I signed up for the Navy, but I still had to go through the rest of my senior year and wait for my deployment date before that came up. And pretty soon after I signed up for the Navy, my dad was like, "Oh, well, I want my girlfriend to move in." This was after my stepmom and him split up, but uh he's like, "I want my girlfriend to move in with us to a new place where there isn't room for you. So how about you just stay with your mom until you go off for the deployment?" I was like, "Okay, fine." At that time, again, we had a lot of conflict, me and my dad, about a lot of things, and I was more than happy to just not live with him anymore at that
Yeah.
point in time. And I was already an adult technically,
Yeah.
right, legally, but I was still in high school, right?
Yeah.
So I was still mindset, I was still a child. Uh, so yeah, that
Yeah.
was I was a little upset about it, and I kind of just like with my dad, I know he doesn't do those kinds of things to go out of his way to hurt me, but it is annoying that it's like you just think that that's not a big deal. Like it's just a hey, my girlfriend is moving and there's no room for you. Like
Yeah.
I'm your kid.
Yeah. Whether it's intentional or not, it's incredibly hurtful, you know?
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that, parents, as a parent, there's lots of things that if you're not thinking about it, you can hurt your children in a lot of ways when you completely mean well to do something
Yeah.
else. That's kind of an obvious one where, like there's possibly a negative impact there. Um, so you've said that you had conflict with your dad, but it doesn't sound like until that point you changed or fought to change or wanted to change your schedule. So what did that look like in well, maybe we should back up to when your stepmom comes into the picture. So bring me up to speed on how old you were when your stepmom came into the picture and what that kind of did for your life.
So, this is the way I've talked to both my stepmom and my mom about it, and I still get the whole thing mixed up a little. So, mom, Carly, if I get this screwed up when you're watching, don't be mad. Uh, um, but the way I understand it was that, like, my mom and dad were still living in the same house with me, and they were going through that separation process, and like they knew they were going to get a divorce. Like that was what was going on. And so my dad started seeing other people and he met Carly. I don't remember where he met her. I think through school because they both did teaching. Um, but my mom seemed to be under some sort of different impression that he was going to wait to start dating other people until they weren't living in the same house anymore. Um, and so there was, my mom viewed it as this is cheating. I don't think Carly was getting the whole story necessarily,
Mhm.
or maybe my dad wasn't being honest with her about where the situation was at. Either way, it was a mess, right? And, my parents put me in therapy when they started separating, like when they told me they were getting a divorce, and my mom moved out, and I was spending half my time with her in a one-bedroom apartment. Uh, and, my parents made an agreement in therapy that they wouldn't introduce me to anyone new for at least 6 months, but my dad introduced me to Carly before that. Um, and so my mom was outraged, and rightfully so. If I was a parent in that situation, I would be livid. Um, and so I remember the first time I met Carly. We went to a Mexican restaurant. My dad sat on one side of the booth and I sat on the other. And Carly, being so sweet, was like, "Sydney, do you want me to sit next to you or your dad?" And I said, I didn't even look at her. I looked at my dad. I said, "You sit next to her, dad. She's your friend.
Oh,
By the way, my mommy thinks you're a bitch." And like I'm like 6, 7, something
oh
like that.
my gosh.
Uh, so she, I mean, she was very patient and understanding. And I mean, like, again, I think I lucked out. I think Carly was a really great step parent, still is. I call her my bonus mom now. So that first meeting, obviously, little Sydney here was like, who are you?
Yeah.
And, what's going on here? Like, I was still confused. I was still very young. And it was so recent,
Yeah, I was
right?
gonna
It
say
was
it
less
was
than
very
6 months
quick.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas my mom, she didn't start even trying to date anyone else again until I was like maybe 8th grade or like high school. Yeah, it was pretty rough at first, but not too long after that, we moved in. She moved in with us. Uh and I talked to my mom about this a couple of weeks ago because I didn't know this part, but she was like, I didn't know that Carly was moving in with you guys. And so I showed up to your dad's new place to come get you, and she's moving in boxes. And I'm like freaking out.
Wow.
And so she and my dad went and had a fight outside. I didn't know about. Carly stayed inside with me. And it seemed like Carly was unaware that this was not something my mom was understanding either. She's like, Steve, like, is that really what's going on? Does Nancy not know? Is she not okay with it? And I don't remember exactly what internal agreements they ended up all making with each other. I think it was something of the fact where Carly was going to kind of hold off on some things with the relationship for a bit until like the divorce was finalized or something like that.
Mhm.
But Carly did move in with us in a different house, not my family home, but a different house. Um, and then they got married when I was 8.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. And then, so now they're married and your mom is not, and it sounds like your mom never remarried. Um,
Mm-mm.
how does that, so you're eighth grade. No, you said 9.
8 years
Um,
old, yeah.
8 years old. Sorry, you had said eighth grade about your mom. So,
No, no, you're good. You're good.
yeah. So I mean, basically, you live how much longer? Because it sounds like they didn't stay married until you were 18 when your dad's girlfriend moved in. So how did she help? You've kind of said multiple times that she was a good role model or a good, a good person in your life. And then that obviously comes to an end. So take me through kind of that relationship and that impact.
So, my stepmom, from what I remember, mainly worked from home. So she, like, once she started having like my little brother and my little sister, she was at home with them most of the time. And because she had a lot more flexibility with her schedule, whereas my dad worked at a school, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 kind of hours, she was the one who took me to a lot of my appointments on the times where I was with them. That half of the week. Not to say my mom didn't take me to my appointments, obviously, she did that too. But I feel like Carly just had a lot more flexible of a schedule since she was the only one of the three of them that had a stay at home job. I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 6. I was I was diagnosed very early. And, my parents, I think it's a good thing they decided not to put me on medication and put me in therapy instead. Carly was highly involved with my therapy. I would say she was the most involved with my therapy. She is a speech therapist, so she works with a lot of kids with disabilities. I remember her reading books on ADHD and trying her hardest to be the best step parent she could for me. And even at their wedding, she gave me, like, they didn't tell me at the rehearsal dinner, but on the day of the wedding, they called me up to the altar and she gave me a little ring and said, I
Mhm.
promise to be the best stepmom I can be. And I promptly lost that, but she found it recently. So she went to a lot of my therapy sessions with me. And part of that was to build a good relationship with me, to help sort through some of those conflicts and to be closer between the two of us. Like, she went to therapy with me. My parents didn't go to sessions with me because my other sessions were focused on building skills over ADHD for lifetime easiness, right? Like, to kind of have coping mechanisms for
Mhm.
stuff. Um, and then, like, she would drive me a lot of places, like to my sports events and things like that. I mean, she was just always there to support me. Now, again, just like any regular parent or other step parent, we had our issues. Like,
Of
we had
course. Yeah.
conflicts here and there, but she didn't have any of her kids of her own before she, you know, married my dad. Like my mom, I'm her youngest child, so she already had a kid and
Okay.
had one alone. But my stepmom had never had a child yet. And I mean, it's interesting because my younger brother also has ADHD. And so turns out a lot of the stuff she learned by going through all that with me was helpful with her own kid. Now
Yeah.
my sister doesn't have ADHD, but you know, I think it's still, she went through so much effort, and comparative to how many kids I grew up with that were like, my stepmom is gross and evil and she's mean and she doesn't care about me. I was like, my stepmom cares about me for sure. Like, she definitely cares about me. She
Yeah.
went through every effort she could. And
Yeah.
I was very, very lucky to have that. So,
Yeah. Something I would love to ask you going through therapy at those younger ages, because a lot of kids are put into therapy, or one parent thinks they should go and another shouldn't. Do you have memories of the therapy? So you obviously could have memories, but it also was you had different focal points. So what is your therapy takeaway as someone who'd been in therapy as a young person?
going through all that therapy and learning all those coping mechanisms, like, gosh, it was such a drag for me as a kid. I was just like, I'm like any other normal kid. It felt so annoying. I remember once when I was enlisted, I had a badge that I had to wear to work. And I was constantly getting up late. And then I would also not remember where I put my badge. And so I'd be super late. And I started getting written up for it. And this thought just popped into my head. I was like, why don't I put it in the same place every day? And I was like, wow. It's almost like Carly told me to do that all the time, and so did my therapist, because
Wow.
it's an object permanence thing. If I don't remember where it always goes, like if it just always goes to the same place, you don't have to like
Think
think
about it.
about it.
Hmm.
And so I called her that day and I was like 23 years old. I was like 23 years old. I was like, did you know that putting things back in the same place every day is so much easier? She's like, I can't believe how many, like, I can't tell you how many times I told you that. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I'm going to start doing it now.
And there's a lot of those things, not just ADHD related, that
Yeah.
it clicks for you later. I mean, that's just how our brains develop and function. And so that makes sense. But I can see how them just kind of saying it over and over to you, and then eventually you're self-sufficient now, and all of a sudden you're in a situation where it makes sense. And so the motivation behind it changes also, right? So
Hmm.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
Learning is nothing more than repetition,
yes,
truly.
yeah, yeah. So how old were you then when your dad and Carly split up? And how did you see that one coming, or was that also kind of, out of the blue?
It was so different because I wasn't 5 years old, and
Right.
they could only hide so much from me as a 15-year-old. I was like 14 or 15 when they got divorced. And Carly moved into a separate house, and Dad also moved into a different house. They sold the house that they all lived in together and got two different rental houses. And the kids did a pretty similar thing where they split 50-50. So I think at that time I might have asked my parents like to alter the schedule somewhat so that I could spend some time with my kids, but also have time with my dad by myself. And then didn't have to worry about it with my mom because, well, my older brother was 10 years, my older brother was 11 years old when I was born. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
he moved out when I was like 5, so that was before my parents ever got divorced,
Okay.
right? So like I didn't have another kid at my mom's house. My mom didn't have, generally a boyfriend or anybody else around. So at my mom's house it was a lot of like, well, I live right next to where the school is with my mom's house, so I could literally just take a 2-minute walk and be at home and just wait for her to get home. Whereas at my dad's house, it was tough because my dad had some substance use problems, and I personally still think he does. And it's kind of hard to know not talking to him, right? But, he, when I was younger, when he and Carly and I were all living together, like he had a problem with alcohol, specifically beer. And I remember it not as like he wasn't yelling or hurting anyone. He was just kind of zoned out a lot of the time, you know? Um, And became a bigger problem when he installed a keg into the garage fridge, because then my stepmom couldn't even know how many he'd had that day, right? Because it's a keg instead of just a can. But he got better about that. But when they got divorced, he was smoking a lot of weed. And at the time in our state, it was illegal, not legal medically or recreationally. And I wanted to be a cop at the time. And so this is actually a big thing between me and my dad, is that I called his school and told them that he was doing drugs. And he didn't know who had called for the longest time. He didn't end up getting in trouble. He didn't lose his job, anything like that. And at the time, 15-year-old me wasn't thinking about, well, what if dad doesn't have the ability to, you know, provide for us because he lost his job because I told on him, right? But I also felt like, he and Kylie just got divorced. He's not going to listen to his ex-wife. He's not going to listen to my mom because that's his ex-wife. Like, I just didn't feel like there was very many adults I could go to help me do an intervention for him. And so I felt like the best solution as a 15-year-old was to let his employer know so that he was a little bit more freaked out about it. And he started doing it a little less. But it was still this problem where I would come home from school and then the kids would get there and I would have to check their homework because he was too high on the couch to do it. Right. And it's like I became their mom when they were at his house with me. And it was intensely frustrating. And I did end up, you know, starting to act out in ways like where my dad, he would go out to go see other chicks and stuff like that. And he would often be gone just like the whole night. And it wouldn't, like, the kids, when they weren't with me, I would invite my friends over to drink booze, right? So me and my friends were getting drunk at my dad's house. I was that kid. And one of those times, I got raped in my dad's house, right? And he doesn't know that. He never heard about that. I didn't want him to feel guilty that it happened while he wasn't there. But I was an adult at the time. I was 18. And I didn't know, I had amnesia about it for like almost 2 years. And by the time I remembered, I couldn't really do anything about it anyway. So, with that, I ended up becoming a sexual assault prevention and response victims advocate while I was in the Navy. So it became a bigger thing for me in my life. But yeah, like, I definitely could see that they were on the way to divorce before we got to the point where everyone was moving out and stuff like that. But my siblings were very little. I think my brother was like 4 maybe, and my little sister was like 2. So definitely didn't know. They were younger than me when I went through my parents' divorce. So they didn't see anything. Just me.
So, first of all, I'm sorry for all of that. That is a
It's
lot
all
of
good.
rough stuff. Clearly, you have overcome it and you have created a beautiful life and you are a very strong person, but it's a very hard thing. And to have not said anything because you didn't want your dad to feel bad that he wasn't there is that's a whole nother level of strength, but also sadness, But kind of the real unraveling came after your dad and Carly separated. So really after you were
Yeah.
15, which is a really scary, difficult time for kids dealing with anything. When you were going through all of that, what was your mom's role? Was she aware that you were kind of unraveling in a sense? Was she aware that this was going on when you were at your dad's, or were you able to keep that separate?
I'm not really remembering exactly how much I did or didn't tell her at the time. I know that I told Carly and my mom separately. I'm really sick of dad doing drugs all the time, so I called his school and I told, right? And they both told me, they were like, you shouldn't have done that. That could have been really bad. Um, I understand that that's tough. And like my dad, when I was younger, I didn't know, but like he'd always had an issue with substances over time. And especially with ADHD, that's a higher risk factor to have substance use issues. It was just one of those things where like, you know, what else can you do? Like if as a parent, like I can't imagine if I got divorced and my kid was at his dad's and his dad was doing drugs. Like, It's not like my dad was doing meth or something like that or
Yeah.
cocaine. It was weed.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had this attitude back then of like, oh, it's not a big deal. And it became legalized later. It's legal now.
Yeah.
So he doesn't
But
really feel like he
different.
has
I
to pump
mean,
the brakes.
but so at the time you're 15, but your younger siblings are incredibly young to the point where you're being their parent when they're at your dad's. How aware was your stepmom of that scenario? Do you
Oh,
know?
she was aware. I remember later on, I told her, we were talking about it at one point, and she was like, there was a time when your brother was an infant and your dad had left some marijuana on the table and he almost ate it because he was crawling around and like, touching things because babies do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah.
she yelled at him about that. She was like, you have to keep this away from the kids. As I got older, like when I was 18, there was one time I did smoke weed with my dad because, well, I hadn't joined the Navy yet. Um, and it was, it just goes back to one of those things where I was like, got to do the things dad's interested in to make him, feel like we're in sync and that we have a good relationship. It's sad to me to look back on like younger Sydney and be like, wow, she really felt like she had to do drugs because dad thinks it's cool.
Hmm.
Like that sucks. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah.
It absolutely sucks. But I would imagine there's a lot of people who that happens to. And maybe it's not drugs all the time or drinking, or like you said, your dad was like a fitness guy. I mean, there's probably kids that don't feel like they can keep up with their parent that do things that compromise their bodies to stay fit. I mean, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter if the thing is healthy or not, it's the impact that it's having on the child. And a child just wants their parent, to put it plainly, to love them. And if you think that's how you have to get love, then, they're walking that child down that path because kids, they learn to think for themselves, but they're not supposed to when they're young. And so
Yeah.
holding that fact with the weight that it actually carries is incredibly important, but it's in lots of cases it's overlooked. In divorce, I think it gets a little easier because you don't have two aligned parents or two parents where one can check the other one, and in your case, I think your stepmom maybe was someone who came in and provided something for you that maybe you kind of rebelled and you did some of that stuff later. Gosh, imagine if she wasn't there. You might have started doing things at 10 or 11,
Hmm.
which would have put you on a
Well,
totally
yeah.
different path,
Well, and there was a point when I was 16 years old, I did start, self-harming, and she was at my dad's house dropping off the kids, and she noticed, and she was the one who got us all. It was like one of the only times when I was a teenager, like after my dad and Carly got divorced, where they were all in the same room with me, and they sat me down to talk about it, and I went back into therapy at that point.
Mm,
They almost decided to put me in a mental hospital for a
wow.
time because of that.
Wow.
But they sent me to therapy instead. Unfortunately, they sent me to the same therapist that was talking to dad and Carly about their issues, and she was not very professional at keeping that wall. And so some of the
Wow.
stuff spilled out with the therapist. Like she was like, "Oh, did you know your parents are going through this issue or whatever?" And I was like, "Great, awesome,
Yeah.
thanks. I thought we were here to talk about me, right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, sorry,
Yeah.
but and so like I mean, I've been in therapy many times throughout my
Yeah.
life, also as
Yeah.
an adult. Um, I honestly think that most of this has affected me more as an adult, honestly, like compoundedly than it ever
Yeah.
did as a child.
It is such a an overlooked piece of divorce because everyone, and this is not to say that this is wrong, but everyone is so focused, and this doesn't mean they do it well, but they're so focused on doing things for the children when they're divorced and figuring out like the right schedule and all of these types of things. And I think that it's almost like they think I just have to get them to 18. I just have to get them where then at 18, they stop going back and forth, they go to college or they move out or they do whatever. But all of these rules and parameters we've been living under where the parents have to kind of keep coordinating in some way or whatever. It's like 18, okay, we did it. We made it. Now we can all go our separate ways. And the reality and my whole point of this whole thing is that kids never escape the impacts of their parents' divorce, whether it's positive or negative, because it can be both,
Mhm.
But if parents could realize that they can compound, to your point, the impacts negatively and make them so much worse, or they can let the trauma and the impact of divorce be what it is, and from there forward, try to make it better. Because these kids, everybody becomes an adult, and you carry all of this with you. I mean, like we were talking just about the money conversations and what you're
Mhm.
doing, trying to bring up a money conversation with your husband now. I mean, it's no different. It's all these things that you carry with you. And, you know, I think I think you are another example of how a step parent is incredibly important if someone is going to
And
bring a
totally
person into
crucial,
their
yeah.
life, because it can actually make it a hell of a lot worse, or it can be someone who's like this neutral kind of calming force that isn't trying
Mhm.
to rock the boat.
Right.
How, just real quick, how did your mom and Carly get along? I mean, you mentioned that they were both at your wedding. Were they able to get along when Carly was married to your dad, or was that like another piece of tension, or was that not as big a deal?
So at first it was like, as I mentioned, being
Right.
like, my mom says you're a bitch, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
all this other
Yeah.
conflict, right? But then my stepmom was always the type of person that was like, she was always pushing my dad to have my mom at our family events for like birthday parties, or like invite Nancy over for Thanksgiving because she's part of this family. Like, even though she's your
Wow.
ex-wife, she's your daughter's mother. And right, like, my mom kind of like was like, at a certain point she was like, I don't want to be around Steve, and like, I'm not going to come to these things so much anymore, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate, Carly, that you're including me.
Yeah.
Like, I have pictures of like my parents standing with me in between them when I was older, right?
Wow.
uh Doing things like that. And I
How did
can't
that
tell
make
you
you
how.
good?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just say, how did that make you feel when Carly would invite your mom, and before your mom said, "Okay, I can't do this anymore," but in the times that she would come, was that easy for you? Was that difficult? Like, how did that make you feel
this
in those
This is
moments?
another thing with ADHD, is like, I'm just not able to notice the kinds of things that maybe another kid would, maybe they wouldn't, because again, still a kid. But like, like, how much is a 12-year-old really going to notice? But it is like, thinking back on it, it's like, so many other people that went through the divorce type of situation at my age, they're like, oh yeah, I would have two Christmases and two this and two that. And I still did have that experience, right? We would still split holidays, but there's times where my mom would also come over, like, or like, I was in the National Junior Honor Society in junior high, and my parents all came to the ceremony, right? All of them were there. They all took a picture with me. They could stand to be within 2 feet of each other, but it doesn't mean my mom was talking to my dad. And it's like, that's okay. But at least the vibe was good,
Yeah,
Like, they all could come together to celebrate me, which was good.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
for sure. So,
yeah. That's a huge thing because I actually just talked to someone who said his parents would come to like his football game and they would sit as far away as they could from each other in the stands. And as like a 12-year-old, he remembers being more concerned about his parents in the stands than he
than having
was
his head in the game,
playing
yeah.
football. And I think his parents would probably think that they were doing a good thing by not being near each other because they didn't like each other. And so they were in like a safe place far away and that their kid was oblivious. And the reality is completely opposite.
Well, and
And
the other
so
thing
it's,
is, as I got older, like, a lot of the time, like, my dad being on a school time schedule and my mom being in law school and also having a job, the reality of it is that a lot of the time my parents couldn't make it to some of my events. And my stepmom would be the one in the stand with my grandma cheering me on, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't really worried about those kinds of things. But
Yeah.
like my siblings, I think they went through something a little different than that. Like
Right.
definitely my dad and my stepmom had a completely different situation with things like that, I
Right.
feel.
Right. I like how you said, though, even if my parents were in the picture with me, they might not have been talking to each other, but the vibe was good. And I
Hmm.
think
They kept it positive.
that's such a small thing if you think about it, that it's just like for what, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes while we all stand there and take a picture, like, just have a good vibe. How hard could that possibly be? And to your point, they're not conversing, they're not laughing and telling stories and having a good time and then smiling for a picture. They're in it for you and just not making it awkward. And I
Hmm.
think, again, there are other things in this story that are not ideal. But that is something that if parents are listening to this that find it difficult, I hope that they hear the motivation behind what you're saying, which is like, you don't have to be buddies, but if you can stand in a picture and make it okay for your kid, that's a really big deal. And I don't
That's a
think
memory I have
people
to look back on, yeah.
yeah, I don't think people realize how big a deal that little thing can be, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so I have a question and I want to, well, real quick. You talked about being half a week here, half a week there. Did you like that schedule? Like, just kind of getting logistically, did you like that schedule? Did you find it hard, or did you manage it fine?
It really only became a problem with my ADHD, really. Like, as far as how much I liked it, it was fine. I spent equal time with my parents. Now, obviously, when it's like, oh, Shirley's having a sleepover party, but I'm supposed to be with dad, but it's closer to mom's house. Can I just go to mom's the next morning? Sure, whatever. But my dad also, when it came to this kind of thing, my mom, and I feel Carly is kind of the same way with her divorce with my dad, is that my dad was very willing to just give up his parenting time. You know, again, as I said, he wasn't really as engaged as my mom and Carly both were.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, it's just kind of the thing. My dad is always focused on himself. He'll be like, "Hey, I'm going on this trip. I need you to keep the kids for three
Yeah,
days that
yeah,
aren't yours." And my stepmom's like, "Okay, you just expect me to do that? Fine. Well, I love my kids, so I'll take the time with them. That's fine,
yeah, yeah,
right?"
yeah,
Uh, and my mom was like, well, it's a little difficult because I'm busy and I feel like Sydney's going to feel a little lonely at home by herself for half the day, but we can come, I'll come home and we'll watch movies later or something.
yeah,
Like my mom still did stuff with me,
right,
uh, even though she was busy, which
yeah,
was, and another thing I'll put out there is that like when I was starting my freshman year of high school, when my mom said, Sydney, I want to talk to you about something. I've always wanted to go to law school. With your older brother, I was never able to because I was going to college at night and then taking care of your brother during the day. And your dad always said I couldn't do it. And, I think I want to do it now. But I want to ask you if that's okay with you because that means I won't be able to spend as much time with you. And I told her, I was like, Mom, I want you to do the things you want to do with your life. Now she's a badass prosecutor, like putting away criminals, bad guys, right? Doing something she loves and she's really good at it. She's the deputy D of her office already. I mean,
uh,
she's doing a great job. But that was like a thing too, is that my mom had the wherewithal to be like, I know this is going to affect you, so I'm going to ask your say in it.
yeah,
Even though you'll be an adult in a few years, and
yeah.
any parent could maybe write that off and be like, well,
They'll be
it's like
okay.
they wouldn't even think about it,
Yeah.
maybe.
I mean, that kind of goes back to having just the ability to communicate with the children and not treat them like an adult, but treat them like the human that they are, that can process the world. And you can, she talked to you. You're a little bit older, but you could even have that conversation with her 10 or 12-year-old in an age appropriate way. And
Mm-hmm.
even if she in her head was like, I'm doing this no matter what, the fact that she came to you, the fact that she had the conversation with you, sounds like still to this day left a wonderful impact on you. Even if in her head she was like, if she says no, I'm still going to go, I'm still going to find a way. But having that conversation with you feels like a very, like, um just balanced and um just connecting way to involve you in something that is going to impact you, you know,
Mhm.
and it's again another kind of maybe little thing to her, but it clearly had a huge impact on you in terms of just
Yeah.
thinking about you, you know,
Like, I
and
helped my mom study and stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
it's not like we didn't
yeah,
find ways to make it some, or we'd
right.
watch Law and Order and she would point out all the things that were wrong, right? And I find that, and I wanted to be a cop at the time, so law enforcement
Yeah,
was something we could bond over. I didn't
yeah,
end up becoming a police officer, but I did 2 years as a police explorer at the local police station, and
yeah,
I went on ride-alongs and stuff like that, you know?
yeah,
But it's definitely something we still talk about. I'm always
yeah.
like, what kind of trials are you doing right now, mom? I mean, she's sitting first chair on her first murder trial this coming week,
Wow.
so she's doing
Wow.
great.
That's awesome.
So it's stuff like that, and just like, and it is one of those things where it's like, to think that my dad told her that she wasn't capable of doing it, it's
Mhm.
sad to me, because my mom's always been a very smart woman. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know why you thought she wasn't capable.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's also, like, he would put her down for other things. Like, she's my mom is 6 feet tall. She was going to be a model before she got pregnant with my brother, and she
Wow.
ended up not doing that. But she, very pretty, very tall woman. Uh, and my dad would start getting on her for her weight after she got pregnant with me and stuff like that, and after she gave birth to me. And it has affected her so much that to this day, like, I keep pushing her to, like, go out and date somebody. I would really love for you to not be alone. I love you and I want you to have companionship. And she's like, well, I just got to lose this weight first and then I'll go do it. I'm like, you are worthy as you are, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Like, but my dad's voice is still in the back of her head telling her she's too fat. And it's
Mhm.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous to see. And I mean, going through a divorce of my own later in life, because this is my second marriage, 28, 29 years old, and this is my second marriage. It a lot of the things my
Mhm.
ex said to me sit in the back
Yeah.
of my head and camp out sometimes. So I totally get it. But yeah.
It's just it voices stick for sure, you know? It's something you have to actively work through and be even aware of that they're there, first of all, that it's not you. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
actually recognize that it is a separate thing from who you are, and that it's been put there by life experiences, and then actively work through to get those out. Okay, so I want to be respectful of the rest of your time. I do have one question, just related to your career choice. So you talked about wanting to be a cop, but then I know that you went into the Navy. Do you think that was related to what you went through as a child, or do you think that's just you were always kind of interested in that type of life?
Well, I always watched a lot of cop shows and things like that as a kid, and one of the shows I watched was NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. And well, I'm currently doing my master's degree for digital forensics and cyber
Mhm,
investigations. So I would say, I think that there was always a part of me that was like, I love the idea of investigating stuff and putting bad guys in prison. I think that's pretty cool. Or like
mhm,
protecting the country. Right? What I do is important. Uh, I think there was a little bit of impact with my dad, doing drugs and stuff like that. Like, again, there's a conflict internally for me at that time too, uh, with the job choice. But I mean, even me and my mom now, we bond a lot over that because we have similar stuff to talk about. Not exactly, but still there.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And also, I think a big part of it too is that, like, while I thought that being a cop is great and makes a difference, I don't think I personally have what it takes to do that kind of stuff. For me, it's the memory thing with my ADHD. It is really
mhm.
like one of those things where, like, do I think I could be in a stressful situation, read a license plate, and be able to remember it 10 minutes later? Probably not.
Yeah,
And the reality of that is, like, okay, maybe this would get in the way of me being in a job like that. Whereas if I'm sitting at a desk and I'm totally not stressed out and I can take my time, I can write things down, I can Google things, it's a lot less pressure, but I do get to do that. Like, I have fun doing it. And I
yeah,
mean, my experience in the Navy definitely was different and it was hard. I had a really hard time, especially being a woman. Job I have right now is the first one I've gotten since getting out of the Navy, and everybody respects my expertise. They ask me, hey, what do you think about this thing? What's your analysis of this thing? They respect my knowledge. They're like, oh, you're somebody who knows stuff, right? I'm like,
mhm,
yes, please ask me the question. So, and I think that's another big thing is that again, just feeling like, especially with my dad, that a lot of the stuff I had to say didn't really matter unless it was his interest or something like that. I'm in a position now where I'm in a field full of men who often ask me what to do,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah,
kind of nice.
for sure. Absolutely. I mean, you thinking like you had to do what your dad wanted for him to love you, for just very much simplifying, but and now men are coming to you for answers in a very,
Well,
just
and
oh, I'm
also,
oversimplifying it, but I just can see how that, I mean, the dynamic between those two things are totally different. And one
mhm.
is super validating. I want to wrap it up, but I just want to thank you for your story, and your level of awareness is wonderful, and
Thank you.
your ability to see how you have come through it. I think that enables you to reach higher goals because you know your own strength. And I think that's a really, really neat thing. And somehow you got that through it all, which is, you try to find the good things that come out of the difficulties. And I would definitely say that, your awareness of what you can overcome is a pretty, pretty cool thing. And I do end with one totally random, has nothing to do with divorce question. And I'm super interested because I think you know about a lot. What is a book that you've read, that you love, that you would recommend to people?
Hmm. Uh, well, I will say this one's a little related to divorce, but Adult Children and Emotionally Insecure Parents is great and was very clarifying for me. But outside of that, my husband and I are currently reading the Stormlight Archives series together. So if you like fantasy,
Okay.
you know, adventurous type things, it's very cool, very
Yeah.
good, nice long
Okay.
series, lots of
Very
content.
okay. Well, both of those are intriguing in totally different ways. So, thank you so much for sharing and for your time. And I wish you wonderful things with finishing your master's and going on. I think you are going to do really awesome things that we'll probably never know about, but that's probably because they're super incredible. So, good for you.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in. Together, we can shape healthier paths for families to do divorce better. See you next time on In Between Them.